So what I'm going to do is I've got a slide deck. So Jen will put the link to the slide deck and I'll screen share and we'll kind of move between, we're going to use breakout rooms on the call as well. So we're going to do something that's a wee bit more interactive. If you've turned up and you're not quite sure what today's session is about, so we're going to be looking at digital strategy. We'll talk a wee bit in a second about what exactly we mean in terms of that. So I'll share screen. Hopefully you'll all be able to see in a wee second. Okay, everyone see that okay? Yeah, cool. Okay, okay. So you'll get the slides at this bit.ly link, so just bit.ly/curve strategy. Jen will also put them in the chat. You can get in touch with me after the call if you want as well, so my contact details are on there. And on the Third Sector Lab website, you'll get information for the other the other curve training sessions that we've got coming up. So we've got some more coming up over the next few weeks. We've got a whole range of different topics coming up, all 90-minute training sessions. So I thought it worthwhile just starting off by being clear when we talk about digital, what we mean. So this is, I think it's Tom Loosemore's definition, who worked at Government Digital Service. So someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, someone put in the chat if I am wrong, because there's every chance I'm wrong. So when we talk about digital, we mean applying the culture, processes, business models and technologies of the internet era to respond to people's raised expectations. So all we're talking about is how do your beneficiaries and your staff and your volunteers live their lives in 2020, and how is your charity meeting their needs? So when we're thinking about this stuff, we're thinking primarily about your beneficiaries and the services you deliver, but also I want you to be thinking about that internal stuff as well. So I want to be thinking about how do you ensure that your staff teams can communicate and collaborate more effectively. Sometimes it'll be the unsexy stuff, like how do your staff teams submit their holiday forms without having to download 7 Word documents and go through 3 people to make that happen. And when we're talking about services today as well, I'm conscious that some of you won't necessarily see yourselves as service delivery charities. So some of you might be member-led organisations, you might be primarily a campaigning organisation. What I'd like you to think about is everyone delivers services. When we're thinking about services today, thinking about it in that context. So if you're a member organisation, you're delivering services to your members, you're not providing a one-to-one frontline service in the traditional way that a charity might think about it. So when we're talking about services, that's what we're talking about. So what we're going to do very quickly, just to get you all chatting amongst each other, we're going to use the breakout rooms. So Jen's going to do this so that I don't break anything. And we're going to put you in groups of around about 3 people. And in that group, I'd like you to have a chat about a time that you experienced amazing service online. Now, amazing might be stretching it, but it might be that you returned something you purchased online and it was a really simple process and you got your money back the same day. It could be that you wanted to renew your road tax and the letter came in and you managed to do it in 3 steps and it was really simple. It could be that you wanted to speak to your GP and you're able to have that consultation online. So anything at all, what was that experience like? And I want you to be able to describe that service in 1 word. So what made it so good in 1 word? So I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to put you in breakout rooms. We're only going to take 5 minutes to do this. So each of you should have 1 word that describes what made that online service so good. Right, Jen, let's go.
Ross, I think you have to do the breakout rooms, I'm afraid, right, okay, because I don't have the option.
Let's do it, let's do it. Okay. So, hopefully you found that useful. What I'd like you to all do very quickly is put your word in the chat box and press return. So if you want to do that just now. So friendly, easy, rapid, simple, convenient, listened, accessible, personalized, efficiency, available, yep. Simple, 4 clicks. That's more than 1 word, Michelle, but I'll let you off. Simple is coming up a lot, and easy. Okay, so what I'd like you to think, so when we're thinking about your digital strategy today, and we're thinking primarily about how you deliver those digital services, so friendly from Carol there, is do the digital services that you deliver in your organisation have those words? So do they feel simple? Is there 4 clicks before I can speak to an online counsellor? Are they convenient? Are they accessible? So what I'd like you to think about is those digital services that you're accessing in your personal life, does the way that you deliver those digital services in your work life reflect that as well? Or is it a slightly shabby alternative to that? So does anyone want to quickly talk about their example that they've put up there? So anyone want to talk about the word that they've used and tell me about the service? Very quickly. Nobody. Amy, go for it.
We in our group we sort of we had a few sort of similar examples, but the friendly part of it was the one that struck out for
Okay.
me.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think was the main thing that someone else had mentioned, but I thought was relevant as well, was the webinars that we've all been able to join recently have been, you know, sort of really accessible and friendly as well. Like I think that, and we've all sort of got a lot out of that. So
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of services, the way that they're kind of conveyed on your website can be quite standoffish because they're quite formal and it doesn't feel like a friendly space that I'm going to be engaging with. And it can be quite terrifying for users that first time when they come on, whether it's a face-to-face service, it's a digital service. So friendly is a really important word. Okay, what I'm going to do, we'll jump back into the slides and we talk about just a few resources that you might want to think about when you're developing your digital strategy and just thinking about what the key elements of that need to be. So we'll go back into the slides. So I'm going to just quickly run through these and we're going to kind of pick up on a few of them. So the Charity Digital Code, which a lot of you have probably seen already, I'm going to click onto that in a wee second and just show you what the code is all about if you've not seen it before. The Digital Checkup from SCVO, so digitalcheckup.org, that gives you a really nice tool to benchmark where you are in terms of your digital journey. So in terms of thinking about how you use data as a decision-making tool, understanding the skill set of your staff, so a whole range of areas in there, really useful starting point. Third one down, so we're going to talk about this as a concept. So this is from Creative New Zealand. This is a really simple digital strategy template that you can use. So you can download the PDF and use it when you're creating your own. What I would say though is don't think of strategy as a document. So for some of you, it's going to be, we create a standalone digital strategy and it's 3 or 4 pages long. For some of you, this is about how does your main organizational strategy reflect digital and where is that mentioned in there? For some of you, it might be as simple as we have a Trello board and it gives clarity to what we're doing with digital across the organization. And we're going to do a really simple exercise later on looking at how you can develop a 1 or 2 sentence digital mission statement so that everyone is clear about what digital is and where it fits in your organization. But don't get too obsessed about writing a big strategy. So when we're talking about digital strategy, it is not a document. So I just want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about it. Next one down, so the COVID-19 resources we've got on our website. So we've gathered up a crowdsourced Google document, which has got literally hundreds of examples of digital service delivery, but there's also some really useful tools in there about making your services accessible, safeguarding, a whole range of stuff in there. We're going to come on to the Better Digital Services Principles. We're going to talk about that later on. SCVO has a whole range of stuff on DigiShift, which is the other calls that I'm involved with, but they've started to gather up some of the resources in there. So they've got a good guide on service design, one on cybersecurity. So if you click that link, you'll get all of those. And then the final one, which is DigiSafe from the Catalyst, which is an online safeguarding tool, which talks through the key principles. We'll talk a wee bit about that today. And what I'm going to do very quickly is just have a chat about the Charity Digital Code. So I can get a quick show of hands if anyone's used the code before. Has anyone seen this? Okay, so not a huge amount of people. So this is Zoe Amar and the Catalyst and a bunch of other people were involved in this. So Jen and I were involved in the build of the website. So Third Sector Lab built the site for the code. And it's got 7 key principles. And I thought it'd be worth kind of talking about these before we explore stuff any further. So these are really the kind of 7 key areas that your organization should be thinking about to stay relevant, to make an impact with digital. So the first one is around leadership. So making sure that digital is part of every charity leader's skill set. So you might be not the chief exec and you might not be a board member, but making sure that responsibility for digital doesn't sit solely with you as an individual member of staff, that leadership understands what digital is and is able to articulate that direction of travel. And that's particularly important when you come to look for investment or you come to look to change the way that services are delivered, that you have that buy-in from your board and from your chief exec and from your senior leaders. And with all of these, if you click find out more, it takes you into the kind of principle in a bit more detail. It's got a whole range of examples and resources that you can look at. We're going to look at the strategy one in a wee second. Number 2, so we're going to talk about this We come on to the service design section. So being user-led, this is a fairly obvious one, but making sure that your charity's focus is the needs of your beneficiaries. So when we're talking about digital, we are not talking about developing digital platforms and channels behind closed doors and then announcing it to our service users. We're talking about developing these tools with our service users and using service design principles to do that. So a really nice example of that is Bernardo's have developed during COVID-19 a frontline support service for vulnerable young people. That service is delivered on WhatsApp, and that came out of the workshops that they ran with young people who overwhelmingly told them the platform we want to use to communicate with you is WhatsApp, not a live chat function on your website, not Facebook Messenger, not some clunky bespoke app that you're going to make me download onto my device, but WhatsApp. Number 3, culture. So we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail shortly when we dive back into the slides, but making sure that there's the culture in your organization that allows for that exploration, that allows people to try new things, that allows people to share what went wrong, that ensures that digital is not a procurement process. I cannot emphasize this enough. And what we see a lot is that very old school approach to digital where it's seen as a bit of an IT function. It's seen as a thing that you go and purchase. So what we're talking about here is how do you empower people in the organization to get to grips with digital and to try things themselves? So we had a DigiShift call recently, which was focused on no-code technology, so flexible technology where you can use off-the-shelf tools. And there's loads of tools now that you can build an app in-house, you can build a simple CRM in-house, you can use tools like Zapier to plug together these different elements. So when we're thinking about technology, we're not thinking about you decide what something looks like and then you go to an IT firm to go and buy that thing. So we can talk about that in a wee bit more detail when we come into the discussion, the kind of Q&A part. Number 4, strategy. So I'm going to come back to that in a wee second. So we're going to look at this in a bit more detail. Number 5, skills. So if you use that SCVO audit tool, there's some really nice tools in there to start to ascertain what is the digital skill set of the staff in our organisation. If it is quite low, what's the type of training and support our staff are going to need to push this stuff forward? And sometimes that can be really simple stuff. So we've been working with a charity at the moment that provides face-to-face advice and information. And what they've seen during COVID is obviously people can't drop into the premises, so they're having to do a lot more live chat and things like email chat. Now, the person you recruit who's going to deliver face-to-face advice and information may not have the skill set to be able to write that information succinctly, and actually writing up content is very different from having a conversation one-to-one in person with someone. So how do you recruit for that? And if that person doesn't have that skill set, how do you train people to be able to have those skills to deliver that via a tool like live chat? Number 6, managing risks and ethics. There's really good resources. So SCVO has a really good guide around risks and ethics and cybersecurity. So Jen will probably be able to put the link to that in chat. You can explore that in a bit more detail. And then final one, number 7, so adaptability. So how is your charity going to adapt and survive? And this is really important, particularly for people at a senior level in your board. Often you hear this term around future-proofing your organisation. So this idea that you will develop a digital strategy, you'll put loads of stuff in place, and maybe you'll do that over 3 to 6 months. And at the end of that, you will now have a fully digital, future-proofed organisation. And that kind of ignores the fact that digital is constantly changing. The needs of your beneficiaries are constantly changing. The technology is constantly changing. So there needs to be that adaptability built into the culture of your organisation. So what I'm going to do is very quickly look at the strategy section, just to give you an idea of the kind of level of detail that's in there and just how you can use this when you're thinking about developing your digital strategy in your own organisation. So you can download this as a PDF. So if you want to send it on to other staff members or your board, that's quite a useful tool. There's some really simple, quick actions in there as well. So what I'd like you to think about when we're thinking about this digital strategy is looking at your current vision and mission, and then thinking about how digital tools are going to help you address that. So we're not thinking about we park everything that we do as a charity, but what does your vision and your mission state, and how does digital become a tool to help you achieve that? Helping teams understand how digital resources might help them do their jobs better, and thinking about how you might be able to look at some of the internal processes. And we're going to look at some examples of that in a wee second. And then that third one, and this is probably the most important one, is trying to look at what is out there already. So the Google Doc that I mentioned that's on the Third Sector Lab website has literally hundreds of examples of digital service delivery. So what you should be thinking about is there an organisation out there that's a bit of a role model for us, that's delivering a service similar to ours using digital tools? How do we get to that place? What does that need to look like for our organisation? What we're not talking about is you as a team sitting down with a blank slate and trying to come up with a new digital service, whether it's for beneficiaries or your members. You should be looking to someone aspirationally and thinking that's our role model, that's the place that we want to get to. Okay, what I'm going to do is jump back into the slides and then we'll have a chance for a bit of a discussion. So, okay, so this is a really useful way of thinking about it when you're trying to articulate this to teams internally. This is about service transformation enabled by digital, not digital transformation. Some examples when we're talking about this stuff. So this is a really nice example from Shelter Scotland. So Ask Ailsa, which is a really, really simple chatbot which they have on their website, which helps people wade through the private residential tenancy rules. So when the rules came into force for both tenants and for landlords, they were a lot more complicated than people thought. And basically what happened was Shelter Scotland were getting call after call to their helpline. And it was basically people asking the same thing over and over and over. Now, when you land now on the private residential tenancy rules page, that page performs really well in Google. The first thing that pops up is Ailsa, which is a chatbot. You can ask Ailsa any question about the tenancy rules and she will give you the answer to those questions. And what they saw was they had, I think it was like something like 15,000 queries to Ailsa in the first 3 months of that chatbot going live. And at the end of the conversation with Ailsa, Ailsa will ask, do you want to speak to an advisor? So she can either put you through to live chat or put you through on the telephone line. Out of all of those queries, only 9 people then went on to speak to an actual advisor. And what they saw was far fewer queries swamping their helpline with just those same repeat questions. So what I'd like you to think about is, how does content and how does that technology free up staff to be able to help people with some of those more complex questions, rather than just repeating the same things over and over? So particularly for those of you in the room who are delivering advice and information services, these types of tools can be really useful. Another really nice example, this is more about the kind of back end stuff. So Street Soccer Scotland have saved around about 30 hours of admin time per coach per year on just one document. And they use a tool called Pronto Forms, which is a really nice, simple online form system. And they now use that for all their front and back end paperwork. So basically what it means is registration forms, when they're delivering a soccer session on a five-a-side pitch in the East End of Glasgow, they're now filled in on an iPad by the coach, and that automatically syncs to their Salesforce CRM system. That single action stripped out about 7 steps in their processes. And what was happening in the past was that coach would have to carry around a stack of papers. They would have to get them manually filled out. They would then have to go and drive to the Street Soccer Scotland office on the other side of Glasgow. They would have to manually put them into an Excel spreadsheet. An admin person would then need to take that information and do something meaningful with it. So just thinking about for what are those pain points for your staff and how might digital help you with those? Okay, next one, really simple one. So WhatsApp, can I get a quick show of hands? Who has WhatsApp on their device? So who has WhatsApp, right? So WhatsApp is now pretty much the most ubiquitous app in the UK. It's overtaken Facebook as the most actively used app on a day-by-day basis. And this is a really nice example of how simple it can be. So Catalyst Housing Association took their fuel poverty advice service and offered that not just face-to-face, but also on WhatsApp, and they call that a snap your bill service. And basically what it means is you can take a photograph of your electricity bill or your gas bill, that goes straight to the fuel poverty team. They will ask you some questions about it, things like the insulation that's in your home, the tariff that you're on, the size of your house, for example. They then go and connect with your electricity, your gas provider on your behalf, and you're essentially getting a service delivered entirely on WhatsApp that might take place over a week at 4-minute increments that are going to suit you, rather than you having to take a half day off your work, get an appointment at the Housing Association in 2 weeks' time, and then sit in an office with an advisor for usually 2 or maybe 3 hours while they go through this process. So again, it's thinking about how do we deliver something that fits in with our beneficiaries' lives. Lifelink, who are a counselling charity based in Glasgow, made a big switch to paperless. They saved something like £15,000 a year on paper, printing, photocopying, and all the other associated costs that came with that by moving all their processes to digital. So they used Microsoft Dynamics CRM system and Breathe HR. So Breathe give quite a sizable discount to charities. I think they've got a 50% discount if you're a registered charity. And that stripped out a huge number of paper-based services. Now, what that meant was counsellors could get back to delivering frontline counselling, and we're spending less time on that admin stuff and more time on actually delivering counselling. Okay. So what I thought I'd share with you just very quickly, this is a really nice, simple 15 digital evolution actions that came out of the SCVO Digital Senior Leaders Programme. This is a really nice, almost like a kind of bingo card. So when you're thinking about where do we even start with this stuff, is don't let this become overwhelming. So when we talk about digital strategy, there's a lot to think about. That doesn't mean you need to get to grips with it all at once. Do not let it overwhelm you. So you might want to pick one of these to get started with first of all. So maybe you're thinking about how do we get digital on the board agenda? Maybe we are concerned about security and we want to work towards our Cyber Essentials accreditation. Maybe we don't really understand the digital skills levels across our organisation, and we need to do a simple survey to understand the digital skills that our staff and our volunteers have before we move forward. So picking something small and picking a starting point is really, really important. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a wee second to catch my breath. And what I'd like to do is just quickly open up for some questions before we move on to the next slide. So we're going to talk about some of those kind of key areas like leadership and culture, using data as a decision-making tool, where service design needs to underpin what you're doing. But just very quickly before we move on, any questions about what we've talked about so far from the room? So you can either jump in, use the video, or you can put them in the chat. You need to ask a question so that I can breathe. Anne, do you want to jump in?
The chatbot that Shelter had.
Yep.
Was there a real person behind that, or what? How? Forgive my lack of knowledge about but what's the back end of that? Is that digitized or?
So they've got, you can actually, the kind of full source code for that is on GitHub. So they made it open source, so you can go and look at that. You can actually adapt Shelter's bot for your own site. So if any of you are interested in that, if you Google it, you'll find it. Also, Tom at Shelter Scotland's a good person to speak to about how they did it. But essentially, all that bot is doing is it's taking the private residency tenancy rules, which I think is it's about 48 pages. A lot of it's very jargonistic, and it is basically querying the information that sits within that document. So if you ask a question about what are my rights as a tenant under the private, I mean, that's obviously a very vague one, but people have much more specific questions. And all Ailsa is doing is it's using AI technology to query that piece of legislation and then deliver you the answer that is likely to be most relevant to that. And that's all it's doing, essentially. It's a really, really simple piece of bot technology. I would say, though,
the content was quite challenged. So say it's written in quite a complex way, which is what a lot of legislation is. It's the interpretation of that. That's, yeah.
Yeah. The bot, Ailsa, will also ask you questions to kind of fine tune what it thinks you're asking to try and get you to the answer. What I would say, though, is, so since that bot has been developed, the technology off the shelf has come on leaps and bounds. There's lots and lots of really simple bot tools now that you can use that you can essentially deliver in-house. So when we're thinking about bots, what I'd like you to not think about is, God, we need to go and get some funding and we need to go and spend 20 grand getting someone to build a bot from scratch and then deliver it. Is actually, there's a lot of off-the-shelf tools that have very low monthly costs. Some of them actually you can go and play about with for free before you deploy them on the site. And you can think about, how do we get advice and information to people using bot technology without actually having to build anything complicated. So we can put some examples in the email that we send out to people after the call. There's some really simple ones that are out there, and we can send those on. But yeah, there's not a real person behind it, to answer your question. But what happens is, at the end of Ailsa advising you and giving you the information she thinks you need, basically a question will come up saying, did you get what you required today, or would you like to speak to an advisor? And that can then put you through to live chat, or it'll put you through to the telephone line if you need it. But basically hardly anyone needs it because Ailsa generally delivers the information the person asks. Okay, any other quick questions before we move on?
Narette had a good question in the chat about managing expectations and
Yeah.
setting your working hours if you're using a platform like WhatsApp.
Okay, yeah, okay. Narette, do you want to jump on and just quickly ask about that?
Yeah, I'm interested in using WhatsApp. So the charity that I work for has a helpline, and sometimes I wonder if some people might not want to pick up the phone. They might prefer to kind of use something like WhatsApp, but it's how do you manage expectations? Yeah. So yeah, if somebody messages you at 3 o'clock in the morning, how do you manage that?
You can use autoresponders, but I think it's really important to be upfront about when these tools are going to be staffed. I don't know, Jen, if you're able to grab the Bernardo's example that's in our Google Doc and maybe put a link to that in. So Bernardo's have detailed, like, so much detail about how they came to the point of deciding on WhatsApp, how the process works from a back-end point of view. So that's really worth looking at. And for those of you who are maybe not aware, there's a business version of WhatsApp, and that's what we're talking about. So we're not talking about you having a personal WhatsApp, but some of you might have noticed that so for online shopping now, you can get status updates delivered to you on WhatsApp, and it's using really simple bot technology to pull the information from your order into your own WhatsApp account. So it will say your delivery, your item you've purchased has been picked at the moment. It will say it's been sent to the courier for delivery. It will give you your tracking number, and all those updates will come into WhatsApp. So there's a huge amount of potential, I think, in terms of how WhatsApp could be used. But the main thing really is, if all of us have that on our device, and regardless of whether you're 14 or 64, pretty much everyone has WhatsApp, we shouldn't be scrambling about to think, how do we build a really bespoke thing, or how do we choose some obscure channel for people? If we know that's the channel, we should probably be thinking about where WhatsApp's going to fit into our strategy. But again, it's about going back to your users and figuring out what they want. So if you look at, for example, like LGBT Youth Scotland, when they spoke to their users, they use, what's the tool they use, Jen? Can you remember the one that they use? It's
Discord.
Discord, yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, and that was overwhelmingly, so they've got a Discord server because lots of people in the LGBT community in Scotland who are young people, that's the platform that they use, and a lot of people in the gaming community use it. So again, it's just, you need to be going to your beneficiaries and having conversations with them. And again, when we come on to the service design section, maybe just giving you some ideas as to what that might look like and how you might have those conversations. But the link which Jen will put in the chat, Bernardo's even talk about the workshop that they ran before they even chose WhatsApp. So that's quite a useful tool to think about what this might look like for you. Right, I'm going to pause it. We'll have a chance for more questions coming up, and we'll jump back into the slides just now. Okay. Okay, so I thought it'd be worthwhile just talking about some of the key areas that might want to form part of your digital strategy. And again, just reinforcing the fact that I want you to think big, so having an aspiration as to what this might look like, but you need to start small with this stuff, so don't get overwhelmed with it. And again, just reinforcing the fact that for some of you, this won't be about writing a document. I'm conscious that for some of you, it might have to be a document because your chief exec has mandated that they want a document, or your board has said we need a digital strategy, it needs to be a document. So that's fine, write the stuff down, but that can be in loads of different formats. So it might be on a Google Doc, it might be on a Trello board, it might be on some post-it notes in your office. But here's some of the key areas that you should be thinking about. So leadership and culture. So Zoe Amar's survey that she does every year around the state of digital in the third sector in the UK, really, really glaring survey answer that came back this year, which was 73% of voluntary sector organisations want their senior team to offer a clear vision of digital and what it could help them to achieve. So you need to be able to articulate this stuff really succinctly. And what we're going to do later on this call is we're going to look at how you can develop a really simple digital mission statement that's going to allow you to get this across to a broad range of staff members. And I think it's worthwhile not underestimating how many staff members might be slightly terrified by digital. So often when you mention the term digital, and particularly where you get into the realms of mentioning things like chatbots and AI, the instant thing that a lot of your teams will be thinking about is actually, does this mean that my job is at risk? Or does it mean that my job is going to shift significantly from the job that I was recruited to do in the first place. So how you communicate this to your staff is really, really important. Charles Bodworth, who was Assistant Director for Digital Transformation at the Imperial War Museum, so you can achieve great things with small means if the culture is right. So when we're thinking about this stuff, what I'd like you to be thinking about is, how do we build a culture where people are not afraid to try out new digital tools, and an understanding that they will not break the internet if that happens. Now, for some of you in the call, that seems a really obvious thing and it seems kind of ridiculous, but what I'd like you to think about, and particularly when you do that audit with your staff, is how many of your staff are still thinking about digital as the Microsoft Office products that they've got on their desktop, and are not thinking about it in a broader sense, and thinking that there needs to be 2 weeks of training before they can do anything. So thinking about building a culture of people experimenting with things and playing with things. And actually, if you try something out and you try it for a week and it doesn't work, you're not obliged to go down that route with that product. That is very different from going down a procurement road where you have to get loads of money, you have to go through a long drawn out process, and then you get an external organization to come and deliver that thing for your organization. Okay, till we're further along this process, your chief exec is your head of digital. So if you are a chief exec in the room, take note of that. If you're not a chief exec, you need to be making sure that your chief exec is clear about this. So what your chief exec shouldn't be doing is delegating not just the day-to-day work of this to someone else in the organization, but also delegating all the responsibility and the strategic push for this to another person. So you really need your chief exec on board with this. Okay, right, service design. We've kind of spoken about this. There's a really good DigiShift call, which you can go and look on the SCVO YouTube channel, where we had people like Kat McCulloch, who's the Chief Design Officer at the Scottish Government, talking about some of those key principles of service design. So I'd urge you to go and have a look at that. Jen can maybe put a link to that in the chat. The other thing is there's some great books out there. So this is a really good book from Lou Down, Good Services, How to Design Services That Work. So when we're thinking about service design, this is a really good starting point. So go and have a look at Lou's book. When we're thinking about this, what I'd like you to think about is this really simple idea. So don't transform to preserve the how, transform to match the why. So why was your charity set up in the first place? What are you looking to achieve? And designing services based around that. What I'd like you to not think about doing is, we have a frontline face-to-face service, and now we need to put a digital stick and plaster on it. So you're not simply thinking about, how do we take a face-to-face service and how do we now make a digital element to that? You're going right back to the basics of, what do your beneficiaries need? Why does that service exist in the first place? And then thinking about, how do we design a digital service around that? Okay, very quick question. We're going to use the chat box for this one. So yes or no, I'd like you to stick it in the chat box just now. Do you know how your customers and beneficiaries use digital? So very quickly, stick that in the chat box, yes or no. Okay, we're kind of 50-50-ish. Okay, actually now we're more into the just generally knows. Okay, yes, I think from the rep there. Okay, lots of ones coming in. Okay. Right, Magdalena, do you want to tell us, you've said yes, do you want to tell us kind of how you know? Useful to know.
Yes, I know that they don't really use it.
Okay. Fair enough, yeah, okay.
Yeah, most of the people we work with, they are not really digitally smart. Some of them are, so that's it, really.
Okay.
The texting.
Do you want to tell us about your beneficiaries and who your service users are?
Well, people who are on benefits mainly. I work for Waverley Care.
Okay, yeah.
So it's people living with BBV, and well, most of them don't use digitals. I mean, a lot of them have smartphones, so they know how to operate there. However, we're trying to get someone to use the Zoom, and the device sometimes is not working. They have problem in focusing, so there is a difficulty really to get and use the device sometimes. However, most of them, apart from maybe a few who are older folks, is keen to try as long as it's simple to use. And most of the things I use, they are simple. It's just about going through the barrier of it's too difficult.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Magdalene. That was really useful. So what I'd like you to all be thinking about when we spoke about understanding the digital skill set of your staff, I want you to also apply that principle to your beneficiaries. Now, what we can see happen quite a lot is either people make assumptions about their beneficiaries, or they've used fairly inefficient ways of understanding what the digital skill set of the beneficiaries are. So there's a really nice tool from SCVO, which is the kind of basic digital skills framework. So there's two, there's a kind of basic framework, and then there's a slightly more advanced one. And it's basically a questionnaire, and you can lift the questions from it, and you can use it in SurveyMonkey or Typeform, or do it in a closed focus group on Zoom. But it's a really, really good way of truly understanding what the digital skills of your users are, what access they have to things like devices and data, and what their concerns are around digital, but also what their aspirations are as well. So what I'd like you all to do is think about, if you're in that kind of no camp and you don't know, or you're in that kind of slightly unsure, what's the framework you're going to use to really understand how your users are using digital in their day-to-day lives. And digital inclusion is a really difficult thing. What we've seen from a lot of charities is it can often be used as a bit of a brick wall for inaction around digital. Now, not everyone falls into this camp, but a lot of charities have paused the way that they approach digital because we know that all of our service users don't use digital. Well, the question should be, how do you know? How do you know how to use digital? Now, a lot of the research into it is around things like broadband connections to the home, when we know that some people in the poorest communities in Scotland and the rest of the UK are using a cheap Android pay-as-you-go smartphone and pay-as-you-go data plan, or using free Wi-Fi in their local communities. So the ways that you use digital might not be the same ways that your beneficiaries use digital, but it doesn't mean that they're not using digital tools. And again, when we're thinking about what your digital services look like, you should be optimizing those for mobile first and foremost, over and above anything that's going to sit primarily as a desktop first service. Jen's just put the link there to the Essential Digital Skills Framework, so that's a really useful tool to think about where your beneficiaries are at the moment. Okay, I'm going to jump back into the slides again, and then we'll get a chance for discussion. So the next tool that I'm going to just talk about, the next kind of principles and framework, is CAST's 10 digital design principles around building better digital services. So there's a link to that at the very start of the slides. When you click each of these, so when you go through the CAST website and you click each of these, it expands, and you can look at some more areas. But when you're thinking about in your team, what does a digital service look like? These are basically the 10 areas that you need to be thinking about. So starting with user needs, keeping people involved, understand what's out there first. So we've already spoken about that. Building the right team. So that might be about building the right team internally, but thinking about how you might need support externally to deliver that. Taking really small steps and learning as you go. So you might want to start with something really, really small. So the example that came from Shelter, that was thinking about, here's a complex piece of legislation. The problem that we have is our support staff are being overwhelmed by queries about it. How do we design a digital product that's going to help alleviate that strain and give our beneficiaries the thing they need incredibly quickly? Number 5, so building digital services, not websites. It's a really simple principle. So we're moving away from the age where your website is simply a shop window into what you do, into thinking about how does our website become an actual service in its own right. So if you look at some of the simple shifts that organizations have made, so people like Ad Action, who have changed their name recently, and I can never remember what they're called now. I think they're called We Are With You. So they've got live chat functionality on their website, which they launched actually a couple of years ago. And interestingly, their live chat, the most used demographic for that live chat is the over 50s. And what they found is it's not young people that are using the live chat on their site, but it's over 50s who do not feel comfortable coming to addiction groups in a face-to-face setting and want to access that support anonymously, and often at hours that are not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It's again, not making assumptions about young people or digital natives. So when we deploy these services, it's going to be young people that want to access them, but an older age group is still going to want to access it face-to-face. And being inclusive, so there's some really good stuff on CAST's website about delivering accessible services. Number 7, think about privacy and security, and I urge you to go and look at the guide that SCVO have written about that. Some really simple stuff. The other one to go and look at, and we're going to talk about this shortly, is the National Cybersecurity Centre's Small Charities Guide, which has some really, really simple steps that you can take to ensure that all your digital services are secure. And even if that's something as simple as a WhatsApp conversation or a counselling session on Zoom or Skype, how are you ensuring that it's private and secure? Number 8, build for sustainability. So that's particularly important during COVID. Lots of you have shifted very rapidly into delivering digital services. How do you ensure that these are sustainable and for the long term and not just a kind of short-term flash in the pan? Number 9, collaborate and build partnerships. So when we come into the discussion, it'd be interesting to see how you're approaching that at the moment. And then number 10, being open around this stuff. So number 10, this is a really important one actually, is when we're thinking about designing these services and asking people what they want and need, and whether that's partner organisations or your beneficiaries, is trying to do that more out in the open and thinking about how your social media channels can be useful for that. So throwing questions that open to your beneficiaries rather than thinking we need to design all of this stuff behind closed doors and then we launch it to the public. So really small iterative steps and being open as you go around that. Okay. So flexible technology. So we've kind of spoken about this. We've looked at some examples around this. So when we're thinking about this, what we're thinking about is purchasing class-leading independent platforms that are going to talk to each other, that work alongside each other rather than trying to find one bespoke solution. So that one bespoke solution is the very old school approach to IT, and we've seen loads of charities have their fingers burnt around this. So in the social care sector, I'm not going to name it, but you probably all know it. There's a massive CRM and database and appointments booking system, a giant all-encompassing system that is meant to do everything. It pretty much failed from day one. Lots of social care charities purchased it, and lots of social care charities now spend tens of thousands of pounds keeping a very creaking system just simply going. What they'd be much better doing is purchasing a booking system, purchasing a CRM, purchasing every element that they need, and using a tool like Zapier or using some of the tools that you'll get with Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce to plug those solutions together. And then if one of those independent tools doesn't work, they can switch it out and use another independent tool rather than all their eggs being in one basket. So when we're thinking about technology, I want to think about that principle from Richard Craig at the Technology Trust. Really nice one there from Bob Barber, who used to be the head of digital at Shelter. So picking a problem, solve it in as cheap a way as possible, set yourself some sensible metrics and see if it works. Do that 10 times and you'll wake up to find that you've built a whole new system for a fraction of the cost. So what are the pain points for your beneficiaries, for your staff, for your volunteers? How do you address each of those individual pain points? And what is the technology that's going to help you do that? Rather than thinking, we need to build a big system that's going to deliver everything over a very, very short time period. And so when Bob's talking about that, those 10 things might take place over the course of 12 months. So every month you might focus on a challenge of what is a pain point we want to address this month? What's the digital tool that's going to help us achieve it? Okay. Next one, cybersecurity. I'm not going to talk about this too much because SCVO's got loads of good resources. If you've got the slides open, that link at the bottom will take you to that. Jen will put the link in the chat as well. There's a really good guide that Alison Stone has written about cybersecurity and just some of the simple steps that you can take in your organisation. And also the 10 steps to cybersecurity from the National Cybersecurity Centre. So when you're thinking about your digital strategy, how do you ensure that the services you're delivering and the information you're providing to people is secure in your organisation? Okay, I've got someone else in the waiting room. That's very late at 10 to 12, but we'll let them in anyway. Okay, data. So really simple point here from Steve McCulloch at Blackboard. So without data, decisions are left to tribal knowledge, or worse, the whims of the highest paid person's opinion. So how do you ensure that data is underpinning the decisions that are made in your organisation? Now, the classic thing that happens here is a rush to purchasing a CRM system. But what I'd like to think about, what are some of the simple discussions that you can have internally about aspirationally where you'd like to get to with data? What are the things that data could help you make decisions around? So really nice example of this is Street League has an interactive impact dashboard. So they wanted data to help their wide range of funders across the UK understand what Street League are doing and the difference that Street League makes, whether it's in Dundee or it's in Leeds or it's in London. And if you click on the Street League website, you can see a really simple dashboard that they've built, and that pulls data in from their CRM system to display it in a really simple format that anyone who's going to refer a service user onto them can understand, but also that their funders can see at a glance what they're doing and the impact that they're having back around the country. You can filter it as well, so I can click to understand what is the impact that they're having on men under the age of 25 who live in Dundee. So you can drill down to that level of information. Really, really simple tool we're using. Okay, what we're going to do, I'm going to shut up just now. We're going to, in Teams, we're going to use the breakout rooms, and I'd like you all to come up with a really simple digital mission statement for one of the organizations in your breakout room. So a digital mission statement is really just a simple couple of sentences statement that defines in your organization what digital is and why it's important to your organization. Now, this is a really useful tool if you don't want to go down the road of having a whole standalone strategy that's 8 pages long, but you want something that succinctly explains why digital is important, and so that your chief exec can explain it to a wide range of people in your organization, whether it's other trustees or volunteers or staff members or beneficiaries. We're going to look at a couple of examples of this, and then you're going to do this in your breakout rooms. So this is one from Parkinson's UK. So they talk about it both internally and externally. So maximize the potential of digital technologies to improve the lives of people affected by Parkinson's. Internally, embracing opportunities to operate more effectively and efficiently, and externally looking at how we can reach, involve and serve people affected by Parkinson's in new and better ways. The one from Bernardo's doesn't mention digital at all. So Bernardo's one is redesign children's social care in the UK so that we can deliver astronomically better outcomes for more children together. This is a kind of draft one from Scottish Drugs Forum. It is very waffly, and I have to take some responsibility for it because I ran a digital strategy session with them. So it's partly my responsibility. This is slightly waffly, but it does kind of encompass the kind of broad range of work that they're doing. So digital enables Scottish Drugs Forum to reach, understand, support and engage members and partners to improve Scotland's response to problem drug use. Digital allows us to deliver even better training, events, policy briefings, support services and beyond. And then the final element of their mission statement, we're a data-driven organisation that uses digital to enhance decision-making and streamline internal processes. We aim to foster an open, flexible, collaborative culture, ensuring SDF is a brilliant place to work and make change. What I would say is when you're doing it in your rooms, you won't have enough time to write something that long. So don't worry about doing something that kind of concise. So what we're going to do, we're going to put you in breakout rooms. Jen will put the slides link back in the chat so you can have a look at that and you'll be able to look through some of the digital mission statements that are in there, particularly looking at the Parkinson's one, the Bernardo's one. What I'd like you, when you're in your group, I'd like you to pick one organisation in the group, and in your group you're going to craft a digital mission statement for that organisation. So you're going to pick one organisation. One of you in the group is going to be the scribe who's going to write this down on a bit of paper, and you're going to be able to put it in the chat. I want you to focus on why, not how. So what is your organisation looking to do? What is the change that you're wanting to make in society? So if you're a counselling organisation and you provide bereavement counselling, the counselling is just a means to supporting people through that process of bereavement. You're not focusing on, we deliver counselling in a face-to-face closed room with someone. You might be thinking about how digital tools are going to help us get that end result. Think about how you put user needs first, and I want you to also think about internal and external if you can. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and just give a chance for quick questions in case anyone's not sure about what the task at hand is. Okay, quick question. Has anyone got a digital mission statement for their organisation at the moment? Does anyone have a kind of 1 line or 2 line that gives clarity as to why you're using digital? Amy, I don't know if you were fixing your glasses there or if no, you were fixing your glasses, right? Fair enough. Okay, right, we're going to put you in breakout rooms. You've got the slides deck. You're going to pick one organisation, one person's going to be the scribe, and in around about 7 or so minutes, you are going to develop a really simple digital mission statement for that organisation. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms just now. Right, so what would be quite good is if the person who was scribing or whoever has written it down somewhere in each group can put the digital mission statement in the chat box. There we go. It was indeed a fast 7 minutes, Linda. You're absolutely right. So you quickly whack your digital mission statement in the chat box. If you've written one as long as the Scottish Drugs Forum one, we might be here till the end of the call by the time you typed it out. So hopefully you've all got something a wee bit more succinct. Anne has just written, yeah, okay. Yeah, Neil. In fact, Neil, why don't you jump in the call while everyone's typing? You can just tell us what you were going to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, thanks. That was very fast, 7 minutes. Yeah, I didn't get to scribe or write anything down, but we all four of us, I think, have organisations have had to basically embrace or look at digital suddenly. We were all previously predominantly face-to-face, traditional sort of engagement that way. So I suppose what I came with a mission for all of us would be to include or make digital part of our process in reaching more people.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a bit fast.
That's all right. No, don't anyone beat themselves up. It's like you had 7 minutes to like craft a mission statement for some of you might be a colossal charity you work in. So don't worry too much about that. I think it's a really good, that simple point though that Neil's made there, and that's obviously been discussed in that group, is what I think we've seen through COVID is the discussions previously where digital was seen as a kind of second best. So like this term that people use where face-to-face is the gold standard and digital is this kind of second-rate thing that you deliver, is actually those types of conversations aren't really happening anymore because people are seeing the potential. And for me, that should form a really important part of how you articulate this to staff, is not that they deliver a service and digital is a bit of a stick-on, but actually this is a core part of what we do. And that ties into the one that Linda's written about how we reach a broader section of society and how we make our services accessible. And often when people talk about digital, they talk about the opposite of that, because they say, well, none of our beneficiaries use digital, and these kind of wild kind of things that they kind of claim. And is actually, if you're using digital, the potential to broaden out the reach of your services and a much bigger cross-section of society being able to reach them because you offer them online and face-to-face. Catherine, you like to jump on and talk about your one?
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's too hard to write down, we ran out of time, but I'm part of a new mental health charity, but we were just getting set up and coming up with our kind of overall mission statement when lockdown happened. Yeah. So the mission statement we talked about was around how do we make support information accessible, and also look at how we can bring people together virtually to support good mental health during lockdown, which I think is probably a mission statement we wouldn't have come up with at the start of the year, but it's probably it's almost interim one until we get to a point where we're back out of lockdown and being able to do the community support we wanted.
Brilliant, yeah. Yeah, when we're talking about this, what we're not talking about is replacing the mission statement that your organisation maybe has at the moment, but how does digital help reinforce that? How does it sit alongside it? Anne's one there, so Anne works the campaign to end loneliness, so connect third sector practitioners, funders, and researchers to highlight effective loneliness interventions, to share knowledge, best practice and promote collaboration, help develop networks, be more aware of research and sharing the space to build on it. That's amazing. It's really good, Anne. Excellent. So we're thinking about this, whether it's you that develops this or whether it's your chief exec, is having a sense of ownership over that. So how might you run a workshop? So then maybe the next staff meeting you've got, you can run an exercise like this and actually get people to come up with that digital mission statement. And actually what would be quite interesting is across the different teams in your organisation, what do those different digital mission statements look like? So for a frontline services team, that digital mission statement might look different from the people who work in your policy team. And so thinking about how you can influence every area of the business to understand what digital is and what the potential is for your network. So we spoke about some of the resources back at the start of the call. So a couple of ones I want to kind of just shout out, and Jen will probably put the links into chat. So DigiSafe, which is the tool from the Catalyst, which is the digital safeguarding guide. So when you're thinking about deploying some of these tools, that has a really good framework to use to ensure that you're keeping people safe and you're thinking about privacy. There is the Creative New Zealand digital strategy document template. So if you do want to write an actual strategy, that is a really good tool to use. And then the digital service delivery examples that are on the Third Sector Lab website. So when you're starting to help teams think about what might this look like, you're not sitting down and talking about digital in vague terms. You're saying, actually, here's what online chat via WhatsApp looks like for Bernardo's. Here's what a change to content on a website looks like at Citizens Advice Bureau, and here's how we might want to make changes like this. So you're talking about it in reality. Linda said, Lead Scotland have got a good workshop on digital security. Yeah, Lead Scotland have been doing some really interesting stuff in that space. That's worth going and looking at as well. What I'd like to do just now is open up the chat, and what we're going to put in the chat is just, I'd like everyone to place in the chat what your biggest issue around digital strategy is at the moment. So it could be around culture, it could be around your trustees just don't understand this stuff. It could be that you have no way of using data to make decisions in your organisation because everything's still in some clunky access database or paper-based forms. What is the big digital issue in your organisation right now? So I want you to everyone to stick that in the chat, and it can be something really small, or it can be something really big, and then we'll pick out some of those to have a chat about. So just as a reminder, some of the areas you might want to think about, so flexible technology, so using off-the-shelf tools, data to make decisions, how you're designing services, what your leadership is like, what the culture is like in your organisation. Okay, so Amy's talked about resource, Joe's culture and staff skills, Ben's talking about using a database, knowledge and understanding of data tools. Okay, Narette, making sure it's easy for people to join our supporter scheme and give regularly to us. Okay, yeah. How do we ensure service users can access our digital and the capacity? Okay, Narette, yours is quite specific. Do you want to tell us a bit about that actually?
Yeah, it's very specific. So we're, like a lot of charities, we're kind of losing income from fundraising events this year. So we're launching a campaign, hopefully tomorrow, all being well, to attract 500 new businesses and individuals to our supporter scheme.
Okay.
So we're just trying to look at, well, we are kind of implementing changes to the website, to our online form, to try and make that process a bit simpler.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm really lucky that our kind of senior management and our chief exec are really kind of on board with the digital side of things and that kind of trial and error thing. So well, let's do this and see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else or tweak it so that, that it does work. So I feel quite lucky in that regard.
Okay. Yeah, it's worth looking at. I mean, so forms are one of the dullest things that we'll talk about when we talk about digital, but actually the importance of forms in organisation, and forms are one of the big things that charities get so woefully wrong. So I think it was Battersea Cats and Dogs Home, and there was another charity last year did a lot of user testing on their online giving processes, and they basically trimmed what was a 4-step, I think one of the other charities was a 5-step process. Classic thing, you go on a charity site and you have to jump through about 5 different hoops before you can even give them any money. And they put it all on a single page, and they saw 24% uplift in online giving just for that simple thing of changing a 4-step process into a 1-step process. The other thing that we see happening time and time again is you make a search. So I want to do youth work volunteering and I live in Kilmarnock, and I make a search for it in Google because I have no idea which charity I'm going to engage with. Your charity does really well in search, so I land on that page, really interesting case study. I get to the bottom of the page and I'm totally inspired and I want to be a volunteer youth worker, and then there is nowhere else to go because it is a dead end. And so I need to think, right, I should probably get in touch with them. So I click the contact us box, and now I have a blank contact us form in front of me. I have no idea what I'm going to ask the person. I have no idea how many hours a week I'm going to do. I have no idea what training I need, or if I'm going to get a criminal records check. So I fill out the contact form. I never will fill out the contact form because nobody's ever going to get to that step in the process. And then it goes into a black hole and I have no idea what's going to happen next. So that process and putting yourself in the shoes of the user and understanding there should be no dead ends on your website is one of the simplest actions you can take. So when we're thinking about digital services and we're thinking about digital strategy, it doesn't need to be big complex things like going and procuring a new CRM. It might simply be, we have had a real dearth of volunteers, and actually we're going to look at the volunteer recruitment page on our website, and actually we've spread it over 4 pages. We can consolidate it in a single page, and we have no way of someone actually applying to be a volunteer unless they click on an obscure 5th page and download a Word document. How someone fills out a volunteer form as a Word document on a device like that, I have no idea. So how do you make that process simpler? So when we're thinking about the quote from Bob Barber at Shelter, that notion of take 10 simple actions and you'll realize that you've built your digital system, is what are those pain points, and how do you focus on them, and how do you do it incrementally, step by step. So the next pain point is we need to make online giving much simpler, and we have a target so we know what success is going to look like, and we can iterate and we can try out some different approaches when we do that. Okay, Jen, I don't know, do you want to talk very quickly, because we talked about flexible technology and this notion of kind of no code off the shelf tools, and I think when you talk about it and use that terminology, it can be a bit confusing and overwhelming for people, but I think the examples you volunteer for Refugee, I don't know if you want to chat a wee bit about that and how that works.
Yeah, no problem. I think if you've been in one of these calls before, I mean, make no secret of the fact that I'm a massive Trello fangirl. Trello is free, it is collaborative, and I guess the most impactful use case that I have is we at Refugee have been delivering support packs over the pandemic of essential food, toiletries and entertainment items. We've been doing that since week 1 of the pandemic, and we've adapted the service as we go. So essentially, anyone who wants to request a support pack texts a number. That's a virtual number that we have, and we use a service called Text Magic to take that all in, and make sure that none of our personal phone numbers are being distributed. It costs us 4p a text to reply. Text Magic, Ross has just put it in. I'll pop a wee link into it there as well. So basically the process works, we get the information via Text Magic, we process it onto Trello, and then the cards on Trello, if you've never used Trello before, it consists of boards, lists and cards. Each of those cards is a request. The team, so I process it at my end, the team in the office then can see all those requests, and it just works like that. The thing that we've learned very much from that process is adapt it as you go. But at the time that you're sitting speculating what the problems are going to be, for in our instance, people were hungry. So you just need to get started, iron out the problems as you go, manage expectations. So obviously, for us, one of the big problems was people requesting items that we just didn't have at the time. Make sure that you're not advertising, services that you can't deliver. But yeah, you're not going to break anything by starting and by stalling. There's people, particularly in the charity sector, who need your help and are not getting that support while you're sitting spending a really, really long time speculating what's all the things that could go wrong or all the things that we've not covered. You'll learn that as you go. So that's been a big thing that we've learned from that process. But I'll pop in links to the tools that we use to do that, all off the shelf. Nothing was built bespoke for that, and to the end user it probably looks as if we've got a bespoke system in the background for texting in a pack, your volunteers on the way. That's done by free tools, so I'll pop the links in for how we do that just now. So and asking pros and cons of Slack versus Trello.
Yeah, so I mean, so there are two tools with two kind of different uses. So Trello is primarily a project management tool, but as Jen's described, you can use it for kind of workflows as well. And the easiest way to think about it is it's like post-it notes on a whiteboard, but it's a digital version of that. So the cards on a post-it board and lists. So if you've used the project management tool, Trello is basically a very stripped back, easy to use version of a project management tool. It's the easiest way to think about it. Slack is an internal communications tool. So if you use Microsoft Teams, you'll be very familiar with what Slack does and what it looks like. Personally, I think Slack is a much better product than Teams. One of the benefits that Slack has is it integrates with a whole range of third-party tools. So Jen's description there, so when someone texts in and it automatically then ends up on a Trello board, and one of the volunteers in the office says, yep, that pack is now ready to go, and they move that card on that Trello board, that would then automatically update a Slack channel. So you could have a Slack channel that's got all the volunteers who do distribution in it. And then as soon as that's happened on the Trello board, everyone in that distribution volunteers channel will get an update to say there's a new pack ready to go, who can go and grab it from the office and send it out. So when we're thinking about what are these workflows in your organization, and for some charities, they're massively time consuming. And actually, when you look at the time that's spent on these, it's the biggest time sink in your organization. How do you free that stuff up? How do you make it much more simple for people? Okay, Jen, any others in the chat there that you thought were interesting that you want to pick up on?
I don't think so. I'm sitting, sorry, I was halfway through typing up. This is
That's
what we
okay.
do.
That's okay. No, I'll let you get on with that then. That's totally okay. Does anyone have any specific questions about the big issue that they're facing? So any specifics that either want Jen or I to address, or that maybe someone in the room can help? So you're all here because you want to develop a digital strategy and you want to get better at digital, either for internal or external. So what do you think, what's been the big stumbling block that you think you need help with?
I'll go if no one else will go.
Go for it, Anne. Yeah.
So one of the things that we want to do is help people kind of talk more. And we have a parent organisation that's quite risk averse, is the best way of putting it. And they're quite dubious about the use of Slack and how secure Slack is. Is there stuff in some of the SCVO digital stuff? Because I had asked SCVO like about their kind of how good they think Slack is, but they just said, actually, our chief exec is really digitally savvy, so he's quite happy with it. But is there anything out there that we could point to sort of assuage them that Slack is quite secure?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick up the fact that SCVO's chief exec is a woman. So I'm gonna pick that fact up first.
Did I say he? Sorry.
But it's okay.
Sorry. Right.
Sure, should be like that. But yeah, so you can do things like two-factor authentication on Slack. I would argue that Slack is no more or less secure than your email is, to be perfectly honest. So if someone wanted to hack your Slack account, that would be quite a complex process, and particularly if you've got two-factor authentication. So if I need to verify that I'm about to log on to Slack on a new device and I need to approve that on my phone, which you can set up for your email as well, then that's a big factor in making it secure. What I would say is a lot of the stuff that's come out recently about how secure or insecure channels are is often down to human error rather than the technical security of that platform. So Zoom's a good example where, you know, we were Zoom bombed on a call because we were originally putting up links to Zoom in Twitter because we wanted to be inclusive and wanted anyone to join. Obviously what happens is folk will go and look for those links and they will Zoom bomb you. The easy next step is you put a waiting room in place and you put a password in place. Voila, you're not Zoom bombed anymore. So actually a lot of the stuff where things go wrong, and particularly when you look at the cybersecurity stuff, it's human error. It's very, very little to do with how secure the actual platform is. So when you look at when charities have been conned out of money, often it's the classic thing of an email goes to someone who works in a finance team saying, I'm the chief exec, and they've cloned the chief exec's email address, and they demand £20,000 be sent into this bank account because we need to give money back to a funder. Someone in the finance team does it. That's nothing to do with anyone being hacked anywhere. That's about human error and about not understanding the questions that need to be asked. So, and that's one of the big things about cybersecurity in particular is if you go through your Cyber Essentials accreditation, a big part of that is staff across the organisation understanding what being cybersecure is. And what we've seen is a lot of charities almost outsource all that cybersecurity stuff so that nobody in the organisation knows anything about it, but your IT provider team does, which is kind of useless once that email comes in asking for that £40,000 because nobody knows how they should spot a phishing email. Okay, any other questions from anyone in the room? Does anyone feel, I'm going to ask a question for you, does anyone feel that there's an obvious next starting point? Does anyone feel there's a pain point in your organisation where a process is really slow and shitty, or your beneficiaries want a service that you're not providing in a very effective way at the moment? Does anyone feel they're at that point? Because if not, all your charities are just awesome and I don't know why you're on this call. So there must be someone here. Okay, Neil, you're going to jump in.
Yeah. I think, yeah, for us, probably we really need to ask our beneficiaries, like, you know, I think we're scared, or we try, you know, like what do they want, but we maybe just need to go and ask them to tell us, because like I think one of them was like, some people obviously we work with that there's is it data poverty or they don't have, but there still might be some way that if we offer that digital service that they can access it somehow. Whether so, I suppose it's us thinking of trying to put their thoughts into our heads instead of going directly to us maybe a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there, I'm going to put a couple of links in just around just some service design resources that you should go and have a look at. But thinking about how you might carry out some effective user research and making that your starting point. So if you don't understand what your users' pain points are or what they want or need from you, what's that going to look like? So for me, 3 really simple starting points should be: do you understand the digital skill set of your staff and volunteers? Do you understand how the people you're working with are using digital? So how your beneficiaries, your members using digital? And then the third one is understanding what is out there already. So are you able to articulate, here is another organisation that's doing digital well, whether it's a back-end process like the one that Jen described, or whether it's something front-end like the example from Shelter. Do you have someone that you're looking to as a role model? Or is this stuff in your organisation just talked about really vaguely? So things like, you know, using data for decision making, often what happens is just like, we just need a CRM that will solve all our problems. And then someone tries to persuade the board to give them tens of thousands of pounds. You go and buy a CRM and then you realise not very much has changed, but you now have a very expensive filing cabinet. So you really need to be thinking about what are those pain points? Why do you want to have better access to data? What are you going to do with that data? How are you going to make decisions off it? So starting to have some of these conversations internally. Okay, any other questions? We've got a couple of minutes before we finish up. I might pick on someone in a wee second, so don't all leave. Oh, John, do you want to come in?
Yes, I just suppose if anyone had any ideas about at the moment, really like to engage people who use our services in some of those discussions about the way we've been using digital. But at the moment, the way things are, I'm aware I'm speaking to people who are already engaging digitally with us. Just, I suppose, is there any ways of you've come across of broadening out that conversation to meet people who perhaps aren't so confident or already using the channels we have?
Anyone want to comment on that? Any have got examples of that? How are you reaching out to users at the moment? What does that look like for you? Okay. If nobody's want to jump in, one of the things that I would suggest is how do you partner up with organisations that have those links and those connections, and particularly during COVID when you can't have the same access to people. So if you know there's an organisation in your community that's doing food delivery, so like Food Train in Scotland are delivering tens of thousands of packages of food to people every single week, and they're having a connection with people, how do you use that network to access people to better understand how they might want to access your services? And that's been used a lot for like digital inclusion. So people piggybacking on people who have access to people door to door and be able to understand if that person doesn't have a data connection in their house or doesn't have a device to get online or doesn't even have basic digital skills, and then connecting them in with people in their community. So like the YMCA in Paisley are refurbishing devices and getting them out to people, but they don't always know who the people who need them are. But an organisation who's delivering food door to door understands, because they have conversations with people, if that person has no way of getting online, has never been online before. So how do you build those partnerships up in your local community? Okay, any other questions before we finish up? I'm conscious we're at 12:30. Okay, right. The biggest thing is do not let this stuff overwhelm you. So we've spoken about a lot today. That doesn't mean you need to get to grips with all of this stuff. What I'd like to think about is what is that small thing you're going to start with. So, you know, Jen's example there of we're finding the processes around food delivery are really clunky and really time consuming. What is the digital solution that's going to help us deliver that more effectively? It could be like, so Anne spoke about Slack. It could be that in your organisation, everyone is feeling massively overwhelmed by email and constant Zoom calls. How do we improve internal communication and collaboration? Are we going to experiment with a tool like Slack to make that happen? So taking really, really small steps to solve a problem needs to be your starting point. And as Neil just spoke about really succinctly, is how do we understand what the people working with need and how do we provide them with what they need? Right, I'm going to shut up because it's 31 minutes past. Just say if you go on this, the SCVO website, you'll get loads of resources that I've spoken about. On the Third Sector Lab website, you'll get the dates for the upcoming training sessions. Jen, when is the next one? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh, Monday, I think.
Monday, cool.
I think
Jen's
we're
just
doing 2 a
put the
week,
link in.
so.
We're doing 2 a week, yeah. So the next one is actually smartphone video on Monday, which is quite interesting. And then the 15th of July, we've got one on data visualization. So using Tableau, which is a really simple data visualization tool. So going to look at those. They're all free to sign up. They're all 90 minutes. And that is us.
I added a bunch last week as well, so there's some really interesting ones in there. One thing I wanted to highlight as well is Natalie Mott, who's going to be doing some sessions with us, is asking for people to submit sites for analysis, live analysis in Google Analytics, SEO, things like that. I think that's a really good opportunity that you could take advantage of. So yeah, that's one there.
So
as well.
Natalie is like a world respected SEO expert. So yeah, it's a big, amazing opportunity to get to kind of interact with them. How do we submit that? Laura's asking.
Is that we would give her access to the Google Analytics on our own site?
Yes, if you were happy to.
That's that may be a big ask for.
So you can add, just to be clear, you're not giving someone login details. You can add someone as a user on Google Analytics. And
yeah, she would just be a viewer.
Yeah,
should just be a viewer. Laura asks, how do we submit that? So if you go into thirdsectorlab.co.uk/training, when you click on one of the events that you can submit for, it will just, it puts in basically email me and tell me what event you're looking for, and we'll get that sorted. I will stress that Natalie's not going to go through 40 sites if they get submitted. We will be picking 2 or 3, but I think that's a really good opportunity to get some live feedback, bespoke feedback on your own site. So have a wee look there.
Cool, grand. Good, right, everyone go and get some lunch and feed yourselves. You're probably all starving. I'll see you all soon. I'll see you on one of these calls again soon. I'll catch you all later. Cheers.